If we can call the meeting of the Carson City Open Space Advisory Committee Advisory Committee to order. I'm Bruce Scott, and we have the Open Space Advisory Committee here tonight. We'll have a roll call, but it looks like everybody's here, but please go through the roll.
Chairperson Scott.
Here.
Vice Chair Welch.
Present.
Member Evans.
Here.
Member Hall.
Here.
Member Inverson.
Here.
Member Masad.
Here.
Member Michael.
Here.
Member Filson. A quorum's present.
Thank you very much. Nice to see everybody. At this point, is there any public comment on any items which are not agenda items? Okay. We have minutes from 2 previous meetings. Has everybody had a chance to look at those, or do you have any comments or questions, changes? Let's go through the June 18th minutes first. Is there any change, any?
I have one.
All right, Donna?
On page 3, my name is misspelled.
It sounds
Fixed immediately.
That sounds like a personal problem.
Hey, it gets misspelled so many times.
Okay. So we have Donna inversion, right?
No, and your son.
Okay. All right. Any other changes to or updates to the June 18th minutes? Any public comment? All right. Do I have a motion? Don't all speak at once.
I move to approve the minutes from June 18. I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Minutes are approved. August 6th, 2018. Do we have any comments, corrections, or adjustments on those?
Me again.
Donna, what do you have?
I was absent because where it says whether I was here or there, this is my last name again.
I see. You know, there's something going on there, Tamar. You see where the question that Donna's raising is?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the Inverson glitch.
Yeah, obviously it's
Autocorrect.
all right. It's the Inverson bug in the system. Okay, any other changes or corrections? Any public comment? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes for the August 6, 2018 Advisory Committee meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Joanne. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Any modifications to the agenda, Ann?
No modifications, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. Why don't we move right into item 3A, which is for possible action, review, discussion, and possible approval of the Prison Hill Recreation Prison Hill Recreation Area Off-Highway Vehicle Management Plan completed by the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council. Greg, is that you?
That's me. So for the record, Greg Bergeron, Trails Coordinator. Good evening, committee members. A little bit of background to start off. The Omnibus Public Land Management Act of 2009 authorized transfer of the Prison Hill Recreation Area from Bureau of Land Management to Carson City, and that transfer was completed in 2015. A conservation easement was agreed to between BLM and Carson City, and two of the provisions of that easement were, one, it required Carson City to develop a management plan for the approximately 2,500-acre Prison Hill Recreation Area, which we did, and two, it allowed for motorized off-highway vehicle use on designated roads and trails on the south end of Prison Hill, which is an area of approximately 960 acres. However, lacking specific plans and guidelines on how to manage an OHV area, staff looked at other communities for which we could benchmark OHV management, and we found that there are very, very few local municipalities that manage OHV areas in an urban environment like ours. And so in 2017, we partnered with the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council, or NOVAC, to help us develop a framework from which we could begin implementing proactive management strategies. NOVAC applied for and received a Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Program grant, and subsequently they partnered with Rec Connect LLC and Latlong Resource Group to develop the plan. I want to emphasize that the plan that we developed is simply phase one of a multi-year, multi-phased project, and it gives us broad goals and objectives, but many specifics are still to be worked out in future phases. Among the individuals that worked on the plan were Dick Duford with Rec Connect, and Dick literally wrote the book on how to design, plan, and manage OHV areas. And then with us tonight, I'd like to introduce Alexis Nelson. She's the owner of Latlong Resource Group, and Alexis has over 20 years of experience managing OHV programs and collaborating with OHV nonprofits and land managers. And I'd also like to introduce Mark Hildesheim with NOVAC. And Mark has over 10 years of experience in OHV management, and Mark has done, over the last year, a fabulous job of working very closely with us at the city and with the various OHV management groups and with our project team. So welcome, and I will let Mark and Alexis talk about the plan and answer questions.
Alexis, Mark, thank you very much for coming. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
We're an open space committee, so we're open to education about off-highway vehicles. We have kind of a unique situation, as Greg mentioned, in Carson City, and we're very interested in, making sure that our facility, as acquired from BLM, is set up and maintained and operated in a way that's sustainable from a resource perspective and takes advantage of the potential for off-highway vehicle activity in kind of the unique situation that we have. So thank you for being here, and we're happy to listen to your presentation, and we'll have public comment, questions from the board, and look forward to your presentation. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for having us. So, as Greg stated, in 2017, we started working with Carson City, we being the National Off-Highway Vehicle Conservation Council, or NOVAC, 501c3, tasked with the creation of a positive future for off-highway vehicle recreation. We do that by partnering with local agencies and contractors who can provide the highest quality products, whether it be a safety and educational resource or actually a trail plan. And when we began working with Carson City, we knew that we wanted to bring in Alexis. She's local, has a ton of experience. And anytime we can get Dick Duford to work with us, it's outstanding because, as Greg said, he is the foremost expert on OHV trails in the country, if not the world. We brought in Dick to do a site assessment. And when NOVAC and our partners do a site assessment, we use what's called the 4 E's. It's evaluation, education, engineering, and enforcement. And if you look through our plan that Alexis drafted, you'll see that that's the same plan that this follows. And the plan is really more of the evaluation of the area you currently have and what can be done to provide more education, enforcement, and engineering to the area.
So following the site assessment, well, actually the site assessment was conducted mid-April, and I just want to talk a little bit about the process that we use. So following the site assessment, we also conducted some on-site surveys where we were interacting with the users, asking questions, learning more about the area, gaining some local knowledge, because obviously the local knowledge is the most important knowledge on the ground, because these are the people that are recreating and using the area every day. So in addition to that, we held we had a public process where we held 3 public meetings plus 1 informal meeting with the Pine Nut Mountain Trails Association, just to get the ball rolling, spread awareness for the project, and just let people know what was happening, because we really feel strongly about incorporating as many user groups and creating partnerships, and we thought that the Pine Nut Mountain Trail Association would be a good starting place to make that happen. So the first public meeting happened on May 13th, and we invited all of the adjacent landowners and residents around the Prison Hill area. And it was not a meeting to gather any kind of public comment. We just wanted to hear from the landowners. We wanted to hear their concerns. We wanted to address any issues up front, talk about the process, talk about the site assessment, and the putting together the management plan. So that was the first meeting. And then the second meeting was held on Monday, May 20th, and that was held here, and that was open to the public. And this was the meeting where we invited all of the user groups representing anywhere from the ATVs to the four-wheel drive community to motorcycles, dirt bikes, trials. And we had a pretty good turnout. And so Mark and I presented to the participants, and then we had everybody fill out an individual questionnaire, and then we had everybody work in groups and talk about what they would like to see, what kind of improvements they would like to see at Prison Hill, what are some of their concerns with what's going on with the activities at Prison Hill. And so we had a really interesting and good interactive process. So we gathered all of those comments, and then the third meeting was held with the working group. And the working group, the purpose of the working group is to invite representatives from all aspects of the activities held on Prison Hill, plus some adjacent landowners. So everybody has some kind of voice in the process. And the purpose of the working group is to provide connectivity between the project team and Carson City and what's happening on the ground. So if we need to do a specific site visit, or if we need some more local knowledge, this is where the working group plays a key role in this whole process. So after we went through all of the three public meetings, we also had an online survey where we had 66 participants answer questions, and all of that information is compiled within the management plan and also found in attachment 1 in the appendix of the management plan. So basically, after the meeting, after compiling the comments, some general improvements that the users would like to see are trail signs, trail difficulty rating system, designated routes, enforcement, more family-friendly trails and skills development areas, and camping. So that was basically the generalization of the comments. And what's interesting is most of the comments were part of what we had recognized in the plan and also had put in our recommendations. So there's some congruency with what the public wanted and with what our professional assessment yielded.
One change that we actually made over the weekend, because we received some very good feedback from Robin, is that camping is not allowed at Prison Hill without issuance of a special permit for a special event. And so within our initial recommendations, based on public feedback, we asked the city to consider that, not knowing that it was specifically forbidden without permit. So that has been changed in the latest version that we have delivered to Carson City. It would not be in the version that was in your guys' packet.
So after the site assessment was completed and we compiled all the comments, we put together the first draft of the management plan based on what Dick had found was as the current conditions of the area. And then we used the 4 E's and applied that within the scope of the management plan. And then obviously we wanted to consider the comments and the feedback that we received from the users. And so that's where we put together the actual management plan. And I'm not sure how much detail you would like me to go into. So maybe the one thing I do want to read out loud is the vision of the management plan. And this vision, we worked with Ann and Greg before we put together the draft of the management plan, and so this was a collaboration effort. So the vision of the management plan, or the vision of the area, excuse me. This multi-phase project will provide Carson City residents and visitors a wide variety of high-quality off-highway vehicle recreational opportunities that are free to the public in a well-managed day-use setting. The look and the feel of the site will represent professionalism and quality and offer an array of unique features to attract beginners, experts, competitors, families, and non-motorized enthusiasts. The sustainable network of designated trails and facilities within the Prison Hill Recreation Area is a genuine asset and a family-friendly OHV destination for Carson City and its residents. So one of the things that we really wanted to focus on is we wanted to make guidelines that are all-inclusive. So not only are we obviously wanting to create a high-quality OHV experience for all of the OHVers, we also wanted to create a good experience for the non-motorized users. And so this plan emphasizes that we highly recommend that both uses are going to be serve in perpetuity throughout the management of this area.
And I guess one thing we wanted to talk about tonight is that if the committee so chooses to adopt this plan, we would like to continue our partnership with Carson City and take the next steps to make this portion of Prison Hill a very high-quality recreation area. Novak would be willing to continue to seek grant funds to improve that area, provide further management, and help everyone have a recreation experience that they can be proud of. There are specific actions that we would have to take, looking at new parking areas, creating a trail layout and design plan, a sign plan, a facilities plan, reinforcing the boundaries or creating boundaries where they've been lacking. But it would be a lot of work, but it'd be an awesome project, something that we could all be proud to be part of. And with your support, that's what we would like to continue to pursue.
Anything else at this point? A couple of questions, and then we'll open up for public comment, and then come back to the committee for their thoughts and ideas. As you well know, we've had lots of input on this area. A lot of it is related to limitations or deficiencies in signage, deficiencies in boundary delineation, the kinds of things you've identified. Tell us a little bit about timeframes and process for Phase 2 and Phase 3, which you've just graciously offered to have us consider moving forward with. And I think to put the questions and the comments in context, it might be helpful to have just a brief idea of what that involves and about what the time frame might be. Mark or Alexis?
Our estimated time frame is that we could begin with trail layout and design and facilities plan, as well as some beginning educational type projects, letting visitors to the area know what changes are coming and why they're happening, some interim maps. We could have that done next spring. Trail layout design would take approximately 6 weeks. Then we would have to go into some mapping, contracting to bring in the appropriate equipment operators to start building some of the trails. But we estimate that we could start some of the construction next fall. The only holdup there is that there are certain clearances that are required by the Recreation Trails Program, and if those are pursued, that may push it out a little bit. However, the grant funds that we would pursue from Nevada OHV Commission are good for 2 years, and if this project receives funding from the Recreation Trails Program, Janice Kyler has said that those can be allotted up to 3 years. So Phase 2 at a max would be 2 to 3 years. Phase 3 would be construction, which is relatively fast and in comparison to other steps as far as planning and laying out trails. So it's realistic to say that this could be totally completed within the next 5 years.
Okay, that helps a lot, I think, put it into context. Are you suggesting that your efforts would include trying to essentially have this work funded through grants? With obviously staff and that sort of thing from Carson City, or is there a potential budget required? And I don't want to get hung up on the money, but I think we need to think about the bigger picture while we're talking about the short term here.
Mr. Chair, so far, any efforts on this project have been funding by the Nevada Off-Highway Vehicle Commission, and it is our, the project team has wanted to continue to go down that path because there has been quite a bit of money in the OHV Commission's grant fund as well, and as in the Recreation Trails Program motorized portion that is not utilized in Nevada. So it is our plan to access those funds to continue your project, and both of the coordinators for those projects feel that they will at least be able to mostly fund those projects. Being that it's not an emergency status, if it doesn't happen to get funded, I mean, it's not like you're waiting on a highway or a school to be built. We can come back to the grant funds and continue the process.
Well, yeah, and I don't mean to leave a wrong impression. We're cheap, but we're not that cheap. We're very interested, and I think there'll be a lot of interest in trying to see a process move forward in a logical way, both for the benefit of the residents up there and some of the issues they're dealing with now, as well as for kind of enhancing what's a pretty unique experience and something that has potential for economic development and further attraction to Carson City. So we don't want to dwell on that, but we appreciate the fact that you're trying to help as much as possible financially, and we'll want to work closely with you. There may be some land use issues or other things that this committee can be helpful on with regard to some of the administrative or legal or other requirements that you run into. So I guess with that, I'd ask the committee if you have any burning questions now, or if you want to wait till we hear from public comment and then come back.
Do you want questions regarding the report itself and recommendations now, or you want those later?
I'm open. I guess my preference would be, let's hear the public comment. Let's kick it around at the committee level, and then if there's any final public comment, we'll listen to that, if that's okay. We have a number of regulars here, and we have it's appreciated that many of you, Ron and Robin especially, who have been here before, are here tonight. And I don't know if you had comments or anything to offer, but we'll open it up to public comment. Yeah, you guys can sit down for now, and we'll kick it around. We'll have you come back up when we finish listening to public comments. But we'll hear the public comments first, and then we'll go back. Thank you. Robin, you are halfway up.
Yes. Robin Orloff, speaking, Chair and Committee. I wanted to thank Alexis and Mark and Dick for all your work, an excellent report. I was glad to read that the focus will be to have multi-use and represent all of the users and to protect and preserve the area. I thought that was quite obvious in the discussion of the trail mapping, remapping. I appreciate the awareness or the response to my comment about camping, and I'm still, I do have a question, I guess, for open space in terms of reconciling the conservation easement and the OHV use in that land and some of the prohibitions in the conservation easement. So camping, I understand, won't be allowed in general, but I guess to be discussed would be permitted with special events. So I'd like to discuss or consider that in the future if that's even allowable under the conservation easement. And I know Dick had expressed concern about fire, and I think maybe litter with camping, so I don't think he was totally in favor of it in the report. And the other question I had was paintball. Paintball was seen as a use when Dick did his study on the area, and I'm wondering if that's allowable under conservation easement and the land management plan that Open Space developed, so I wanted to clarify that. But I'm real pleased with with some of the suggestions and the fact that we're all going to be included in the discussion in the working group. So I think it's all positive. Oh, I guess I can talk a little more. And maybe to clarify, too, we talked, I sent in suggestions about maybe buffer zones around some of the rock outcroppings when determining the boundaries and the mapping to maybe keep the areas more pristine, and also an identification, again, of the main road. There was a discussion of access to the summit, and maybe we could talk about that versus all the roads that have been created to get to the summit that access those outcroppings, leading to more litter there and disturbance maybe of the eagles and graffiti. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you for your continued input. I think many of those questions we should have staff keep track of, and we'll follow up with those as we get into phase 2. Because some of those things, I think the committee is going to want to hear what the interpretation is of the conservation easement, and potentially make recommendations on some of those uses or the limitations on some of those uses. So, other public comment?
My name is Ron Moe. I live in the greater area of Prison Hill and like to go up there and hike, especially in our colder times when I can't get out to the rest of Nevada. Anyway, and I mentioned it last time about the golden eagles, and we're in Eagle Valley. The south end of Prison Hill borders Golden Eagle Lane, and it's just to emphasize what Robin said, some of the rocky areas where I have seen in the past golden eagles. And I just want to know that maybe we can make a difference and help in the planning of a buffer zone of these rocks. And I'm not sure if things just carry on or if we've got an influence on that. Anyway.
Well, certainly your input is an influence and a placeholder for us to, as we get into any further environmental work or that kind of thing, if there are active nests or other activities, I think those will have to be looked at, Ron. So we will make sure that that's on the list of things to put into the process of the next step, phase 2.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further public comment?
For the record, Nancy Santos, President of Friends of Silver Saddle. My only comment is, and it's kind of for the next phase 2, is the boundary markers to keep the OHV vehicles on the south end of Prison Hill and not coming down into the ranch proper and doing some of the things that have been done in the past. So that's my biggest thing, is just, making sure that there's proper boundaries.
And that's, I think, a valuable and a comment that we've heard before. And I would hope in our process of planning and engineering, we might be able to come up with some early action with regard to signage, because it's been a continuing problem.
And I'll also throw in there, as a biologist, the concern about the eagles is important too. So that's all.
Thanks, Nancy. Other public comment? Okay, to the committee. Comments, questions? Margie, you had said you had raised it, so we'll start with you.
Well, I actually have 2 things that I'm trying to sort out. And I have to say that I didn't read every single word of this report, but I did try to catch most of it in a general, quick reading sort of way. Donna probably read every word. I was trying to find out through here what the plan is going to be for the fall line trails. I am concerned about those specifically because those from a recreational standpoint are some of the funnest trails to ride, but from an environmental standpoint, they have the most severe impact on the environment with erosion and that sort of thing. So what do you generally do when you come across fall line trails? And I think we have quite a few of them out there.
Member Evans, you'll see, I don't know if you saw in the
I'm
assessment.
sorry, Mark. We need to have you reintroduce yourself so that when she listens to the minutes, she'll know where you came from.
This is Mark Hildesheim from Novak. Member Evans, to respond to your question, we do not condone the building or continued use of fall line trails because they are not sustainable. Oftentimes they are thought of as fun, and the reason they're thought of as that way is because people haven't experienced a properly designed trail with grade reversals and consideration for water control. Those are often a lot more fun. They have flow and they do ensure resource protection. So our plan would be to, during our trail layout and design phase, is to look for alternatives to those trails that still provide a fun, challenging experience, but do not cause erosion and sedimentation down onto your roads into the local residents' property.
Thank you for that. And you brought up my other question, which I was sorting through here. I was trying to determine exactly what we expect will come from Phase 2 and what will come from in Phase 3.
Phase 2 will primarily be education and design. Designing proper trails, proper trailheads, and access that, protects the local private property owner's interest, that keeps people from ingressing onto out-of-bounds property, not motorized property, and to provide fun experiences on the trails so people want to stay in that southern end because they're going to have a quality trail experience. After the layout design, we hope to start some of the construction. That way, we have Dick Ford working on the project. He will be able to oversee the contractor and make sure that they start it on the right path, that they're building the trails correctly, and finding that fun experience with the resource protection. Phase 3 will be a completion of the construction and signing, final mapping. Once we have the complete trails plan, we'll need to seek money for final mapping, and then probably some of the facilities to keep the area safe, clean, and enjoyable.
Thank you. I had come across some of the goals of Phase 2, but I couldn't figure out why those weren't part of Phase 1, things that we could be doing really soon. But I get the impression that that if we're going to do them in the phases that you're proposing, we need to do it through the grant process rather than jumping in and taking some of our own open space money and getting things started, such as the boundary signage and that sort of thing. So that's all I had to say, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Donna, did you want to spell your last name first? Or?
Thanks. I did read every word of this report, although late last night with the help of a 3.5-month-old kitten. So there may be some missing points. I'd just like a couple of clarifications. First, I'd like to say, great report. Well written, well thought out. It's beautiful. But I do have a couple of questions. On the recommendations, number 11, I'd like some clarification from staff first regarding review of current boundaries. Is that even possible to change the boundaries, given what came from the feds when we received the property?
Ann Bollinger, for the record. To a small extent, yes. When Prison Hill was under the ownership and management of the BLM, if you look at the old maps, the boundary followed parcel lines, so very square lines on the map, and it did not represent the trails on the ground very well because the trails often followed the topo lines or the ridge lines, and so the trails went in and out of that boundary. So about the time the land transferred or soon after, BLM did have a grant from the Recreational Trails Program to create the maps that are currently on the site. And so considering that the land was in that process, we worked with BLM with that very question: can we adjust the boundary so the trails are solely within, the motorized trails are solely within the motorized boundary? So yes, there is a little wiggle room for adjustment as long as it's a logical process.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that this isn't a hidden agenda to encroach more on the non-motorized, grab more land. This is more of a logical thing, like if the boundary is through a rock, it'll go around the rock instead of trying to go through a rock type thing. Okay, that makes sense. And on number 15, just to clarify for me, prohibiting cross-country travel, you're talking about if somebody wants to get from point A to point B, rather than recreating, that's what's prohibited.
Member
Inverson.
I'm afraid to mispronounce it now. I'm intimidated. Yeah, that's exactly what we're saying, is that, recreational use should stay on the trails to prevent resource impacts, and these trails are going to be designed to be fun, and people are going to want to stay on them in the way. But in the desert environment, cross-country travel is extremely impactful, and we want to educate users not to do that, and that will be part of the education and sign plan out there.
As a hiker, we call that cutting trail.
I'm from Washington. We called it boonie jumping.
I'm just curious about the design of trails. Is it somewhat similar to building single-track trails with grade reversals and that sort of thing? Or are you familiar with, like mountain biking associations guidelines?
Member Welch, yes, absolutely. You'll find that there are a lot of common shared items when designing motorized trails that are very comparable to the mountain bike designs. However, there are some things that have to be taken into account, forces, rotational forces, weight of the machines, those kind of things that make a difference in how big a grade reversals you use and how wide your turns have to be and those kind of things. So there are similarities, but there are some differences, and that's kind of where we specialize in designing the trail, is just making sure that we help people accommodate for those differences between motorized and non-motorized use.
Sure, I've got a couple. When I read the report, one thing that stood out was, I agree that the report was really well written. I think it's a very good starting place. One issue was the noise, especially in relation to motocross vehicles that commonly exceed the acceptable 96 dB level. And it was mentioned that, that folks often go there to practice for, their competitions. But I didn't see a solution. What ideas are there to, I guess, prohibit? Because I see that as if I was an adjacent landowner, that's what would bug me the absolute most about having an OHV area. It would be the noise. So I was just wondering what ideas there might be to prohibit the use of vehicles that exceed the decibel level.
Member Hall, in the next phase of the grant, which we are currently working on the applications for with Greg and Ann, we are actually planning planning to apply for purchase of a sound meter, and Novak and Rec Connect would actually train Carson City staff and law enforcement how to test for that actual sound level. We've been discussing how we can set up rules that are more stringent than what the actual state laws say, because Nevada doesn't actually have a lot of state laws for OHV use, including sound limits, spark arresters, safety gear that would be required at Prison Hill that would provide a better riding environment. So included within that would be a sound meter that would be tested, or that would allow them to test for that sound and educate riders on if their machine is too loud or not.
So it's possible, I'm not an OHV user. It is possible to have a motocross vehicle that has a silencer that reduces that level?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to two follow-ups, one for Robin and one for Ron. Whenever we talk about Prison Hill, you can expect Robin and Ron to be here, so I just wanted to address that. Robin mentioned the access to the summit, which I remember reading. What's the idea for access to the summit? Is it more of a pedestrian access, like a single track that would be installed on the OHV side, separate from the OHV trails? Or would it be a shared use path, or would it be, two separate trails that would lead to the summit so that both pedestrians and OHV users could experience the summit?
The idea behind that recommendation stemmed from typically OHVers like to go to a destination, and so that would serve as a really cool destination spot, plus it's a fantastic view from the top. However, we were thinking that it would be a trail wide enough to accommodate a high clearance four-wheel drive vehicle, and so not any car could just access the top. It would need to have four-wheel drive capacity or capabilities to get to the top. And that was the intent.
Okay, understood. What about pedestrians? Do they need to access the summit from the other side, from the non-OHV side of Prison Hill?
Member Hall, Mark Hildesheim again. That's not the intent. I think, Alexis touched a lot earlier that everything that we plan to design would be with the intent of having it multi-use. If there is a need during the planning phases to have a separate trail, that is definitely within the consideration, and that's something that we would look to the staff, the working group, Robin and Ron, and those type of folks to inform us on.
Okay, thank you. I guess I don't have an opinion either way. Mountain bikers, pedestrians have their own side of Prison Hill, and so I would be fine with the compromise of having an OHV trail on the south side that's only for OHV users. That would make sense. We're sharing the whole thing, so I suppose, in my opinion, everybody doesn't need to have access to everything. The other side of the Prison Hill, we certainly don't want OHV users on that, so it's a good compromise in my view. The last question I had was to address Ron's question about Golden Eagles. I believe we brought this up at one point before, and it's been discussed. Robin actually mentioned it, a buffer zone around rock outcrops. Now, that seems like that might be an appropriate way to address the disturbance of golden eagles, but I'm not a biologist. I don't know if there is a standard or if there's even been a study that demonstrates the buffer size appropriate to not disturb golden eagles. So just by saying we're going to have a buffer zone does not necessarily mean it's not going to disturb golden eagles. So I just thought I would put that out there. Perhaps Joanne might have something that she could provide to that. She's more knowledgeable than I am about this type of subject, but I just thought that, Ron and Robin's comments should not go unheard.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Jerry, any comments or questions?
No, I'm good.
Joanne, anything you had?
Well, typically with addressing the buffer zones on eagles or any kind of raptor, if it's like Department of Fish and Wildlife, it's usually a quarter-mile buffer, which is probably unrealistic to ask for around every rock outcrop on the OHV side of Prison Hill. And it's not necessarily, you wouldn't apply it to every rock outcrop. You apply it to a known nesting,
Right.
an active nest. So that's, I don't know, just something to consider. I read most of this plan. I thought it was very well written, and I appreciate the comprehensive approach coming up. At least this is, I guess maybe I should ask for clarification, but the way I read this was that as part of phase 2, you're going to have sort of a master trail plan developed before you just start construction on new trails. Because in reading this, I remember at one point the mention of there being 26 miles of trail per square mile on Prison Hill, which, as I think your report even says, is pretty high. And that seems pretty high to me too. So I think this part of phase 2 where you're going to use your evaluations done in phase 1 to develop an overall master trail plan that would probably include, I'm guessing that some trails will be cut off, some existing trails, and make more of a travel plan. Is that correct? That's the way I was envisioning what you wrote.
Member Michael, yes, absolutely, that is the plan. Coming in with an unknown when we started the management plan, not having an exact idea of what needed done, we didn't want to go after trail layout and design in the first phase, not knowing how much we needed to do, what could be kept, what needed to go away. So that's why that we would propose to seek that money and conduct that work in the second phase, come up with an actual trails travel plan, have designated routes or limited open areas, and then construct those actual sustainable routes in the future.
I also thought the whole project overall is pretty exciting, and a lot of your educational components or your family-friendly components, because I do have lots of friends with little kids out there teaching them how to ride, and there being designated areas for new beginners makes a lot of sense, I think, and to keep them separated from some of the more difficult trails or faster riders. So no, I thought it was really well done.
Thank you, Joanne. A couple of comments. One, I'm not sure, I think we need to be sensitive to the raptor issue and the eagles, but frankly, I think the BLM probably cast a die in this area with their original designation of this as an OHV area that probably has created a pretty difficult environment, generally speaking, for eagles. That's something that probably needs to be more carefully looked at as part of phase 2. It seems to me, I'm really happy to see this come forward. I did have one question, Greg. My version of the staff report in the lower right column says final version 12/4/15 in the lower right-hand corner. I assume since it's dated October 15th, 2018, that we probably are not that far behind.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Chairman, that date is the date of the staff report form, not the date of the report itself.
Thank you. Hopefully that form gets updated every once in a while. Is there any further public comment at this point? All right, seeing none, we have an agenda item here that allows for action. We've heard a request not only that we consider approving this plan, but that we also consider authorization to move forward with phases 2 and 3, which would include potentially some staff involvement and grant application or grant applications. So with that background, do we have any further discussion or a motion from the committee? Margie.
I have a couple of comments that I wanted to put towards staff. One of them being that where in your work plan are you going to have the time and resources to develop the maintenance plan for this area? And I apologize, I am not on the top of my game. I don't remember the other one now. It seemed important at the time.
And did you want to address that?
The maintenance plan, I hope, will be part of phase 2 and 3 that the team will work on for us and then provide those recommendations.
Maybe to carry that further, my impression of what we heard tonight is that phases 2 and 3 are being offered for consideration subject to grant approval, essentially a turnkey operation from the same folks that have brought us phase 1, with obviously some staff involvement and coordination, probably significant coordination on Greg's part. But is that accurate, Greg, from your perspective, or Ann?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
I remembered my other part. This also for staff. There's some regulations that need to be enacted in regard to OHV at this site. Are they things that we need to be looking at in our during the municipal code changes, or are they things that parks can put out as rules for use?
Oh boy, that's a dangerous question. We're so close to finishing the ordinances that the advisory committee approved maybe 2 years ago. We're hoping to take that to the board next month. So to pause that process to review these, I'd hate to do that right now.
Sorry, Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. Just to jump in, even though we have a lot of the open space ordinances complete, we are going to go forward. Ben and I were just talking earlier, our Deputy District Attorney, about needing to update the parks ordinances. Maybe we could do something concurrent with that effort after we identify that. And then maybe in the future phases, other code changes might be recommended as part of that kind of research. So that way we're not jumping the gun, but we still have plenty of opportunities to bring something forward in the future.
I don't want to sabotage anything that's currently moving forward, but maybe we can have a phase 2 on the ordinances as well.
Yeah, we will not sabotage phase 1.
No.
We need it to move forward. I think the phase 2 and phase 3 elements of the our plan here, the implementation phases, are undoubtedly going to, I think, bring out some needs for either clarification or further ordinances. So I see that as probably part of the process over the next year or two, once we have some clarification on just what we want to regulate. We don't really know that yet. We heard about camping tonight, for example, or we heard about different things. So I think we're going to have another need for another round, Margie, in that regard.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Greg.
Bruce, does it seem appropriate then for the motion that we add phase 1 to the language?
Yes, I think it does, and I would further suggest, if the committee is comfortable, that we provide some direction with regard to phases 2 and 3 in terms of moving forward as they have suggested and we are evaluating. Okay, any other?
I have Joanne. Yeah.
Joanne, excuse me.
I'm just back to the golden eagle issue. In lieu of permanent buffers around rock crops, golden eagles and bald eagles are protected under a federal act. And as part of this education plan and signage, and since we will have park staff routinely, I don't know what the schedule is, but patrolling and enforcing other regulations out there, as you see a nesting pair, there could be specifically for that year, or as long as the nest is, every spring just be checked to see if it's active, and then have a buffer of, maybe not a quarter mile, but of some, we could figure out an appropriate buffer for an active nest. Because harassment of bald eagles or golden eagles there is federal laws against that, and if they're nesting.
And I guess without knowing for sure, my sense would be that the potential for active nests or nesting sites would be part of the design in Phase 2 to identify if there are such things.
Just to have it as part of the when you come into there and they have little kiosks or signage, of the different areas to make riders aware that there could be active breeding eagles in the area, and if they are to see them, report them to the open space or the park ranger, and then at that point they can determine whether or not it's appropriate to have signage for that season until the nest is no longer active. I don't know. It's just something to consider as part of Phase 2, and maybe the educational component is what I was thinking.
Mark, did you have a comment?
For the record, Mark Hildesheim with Novak. Just wanted to clarify or pretty much agree with what you're saying, is that, Phase 2 will not only serve to survey for those sites and avoid them when possible, but also identify those sites and allow for adaptive management within the plan, so that the staff at Parks and Recreation and Open Space have the backup they need to instill temporary closures or permanent closures, whatever the need may be. But like Member Michael has said, if that nest is habitated, you create the option to have a temporary closure, and you still have within your design enough loops and alternatives that people can still recreate there without impacting that certain area.
Thank you. Joanne, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
no. Okay. All right. Do we have I'm sorry, Robin?
May I speak again?
You almost missed it.
I almost missed it. Robin Orloff again, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of the eagle issue and the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. Seems to indicate that even inactive nests or nesting areas should not be disturbed if there's any disturbance of the habitat, the feeding, the sheltering. So something to consider, and I guess that would apply to us hikers climbing around on the rocks as well. And when I wanted to clarify buffer areas, not that the OHVers can't go to those rock outcroppings, but I was just advocating maybe there could be a buffer where they could park a ways away and walk to those outcroppings. It might be less of a disturbance, not just for eagles, but just in general for partying and graffiti and garbage, and maybe protect some of those areas. And I appreciate that we're all talking about it and addressing it. And can anyone answer, is paintballing allowed on Prison Hill?
It hasn't specifically been addressed.
Okay. And then can we talk about now, or is it later in the phase, about closing the Snyder area, the parking area, and there's a talk about another area being developed further towards the main staging area? Is that part of our discussion tonight or consideration? Or?
Yeah, I think that would be the next step, Robin,
Okay.
and probably with public input, public meeting type of thing.
Okay.
But I would urge you to kind of keep a list of things that you think need to be further addressed, because as we get into the design, those kinds of things, at least in my mind, will be important.
And I appreciated that was brought up in detail in the study that Dick and Alexis and Mark worked on. So I thought I appreciate that. And also the pole and vault fencing is awesome. So I don't know if that would be discussion later where that's going to be, but I thought that was a really good solution. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any further comments? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve Phase 1 of the Prison Hill Recreation Area Off-Highway Vehicle Management Plan.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further public discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, unanimous. With regard to the Phase 2 and Phase 3, do we want to provide direction to staff and the developers of Phase 1 with regard to moving forward, or the committee's recommendation to move forward on that? Thank you, Donna.
I move that staff seek grant funding to move forward with Phase 2 of the Prison Hill Recreation Area Off-Highway Vehicle Management Plan.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. On the discussion, I think staff would be involved, but I think what I heard was that the developers of Phase 1 have agreed to move forward with the grant application for Phases 2 and 3. So staff would be coordinating, but probably not taking a lot of time in doing that, other than just monitoring and continuing to participate in the process.
So I need to change that to, give me the wording, please.
I think request that Phases 2 and 3 move forward in coordination with staff.
I move that Phases 2 and 3 move forward on the Prison Hill Recreation Area Off-Highway Vehicle Management Plan. Does that work?
Okay.
With coordination from staff.
All right. Do we have a second?
I can second that.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. A nice job, and this is an area that's been a source of a lot of concern, and we're really pleased to see some of the solutions and the recognition of some of the problems that your report brings out. So thanks again. We look forward to working with you as we go forward. Thank you. Okay. Next item, 3B. For discussion only, presentation by Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch regarding the organization and activities for calendar year 2018.
This is Nancy Santos, President of Friends of Silver Saddle. Unfortunately, I don't have my slideshow to give you. But basically, this year, I was going to talk about our fiscal year, which is, I think it's basically the same as BLM's. It's from October 1st to September 30th. So we just finished our fiscal year. And this year we had the open house for the summer or the winter of 2017. And that was the first time I think that we had the mules out there, given wagon rides and stuff. This was very popular. And I think I've also talked to Dan Earp at the Carson City Parks and Rec, and they're interested in participating in next year's holiday open house. So that'll be quite a big deal. And then we had the spring open house in May, a couple bird walks, and one in May, one in September. What else? Then we have our board meetings that we attend. We were on the Eagle Valley Trails Committee. I've been lax in getting here every meeting, but I try to come when it's important that I come. And then been to the Parks and Rec meeting and the Board of Supervisors as needed. Currently, we have 8 of the 9 board seats filled, So we're still looking for one other person. Let's see what else, since I don't have my slideshow. I don't know, is there any questions, things that you're interested in that I haven't thought of?
Any questions from the committee?
Oh, we're doing our bird conservation stuff still every year. We have the wood duck nest boxes and the bluebird nest boxes. Been doing that.
I'd just like to say that what Friends of Silver Saddle does is very valuable. And I think you don't get the recognition that you deserve, but we really appreciate what goes on out there. You quietly do your little thing, get a lot done out there, and we really appreciate it.
And we've had a lot of support from Muscle Powered too, which we appreciate. And we had the Fat Tire Club was out there last holiday season, and so it helps bring a lot more people out too. And working with the Parks and Rec for next year in the winter, I think will be really good too. So get more people aware, and we're going to be in the parade again this year. We've kind of fallen down on that for the past few years, but now that we have some animals to pull the wagon, we just got a new one, so we'll be seeing it in the parade. I think it holds 10 or 12 people. So anyway, unless you have any questions, that's all I have.
Thank you, Nancy. We appreciate you. Jeremy, excuse me.
Do you have a date set for the Christmas open house?
That's the 8th of December.
Okay, it wasn't listed here.
I just published it yesterday on Facebook, and I don't think it's on the website quite yet. So it's just something.
That's good. That's a fun time. It's
yeah, it has been very fun in the past.
It's great for kids,
too. Yeah, and with Santa and everything, I think it'll be really good with the Parks and Rec, just because they'll be able to bring more kids. It's been a little bit difficult to get the kids out there, at least ones that aren't afraid of Santa.
Well, thank you, Nancy. We very much appreciate everything that Friends of Silver Saddle does.
All right, thanks a lot.
Is there any public comment? Questions? Okay, thanks again. Our next item, 3C, possible action, review and discussion regarding the feasibility of water production improvements and to recommend to the Board of Supervisors pursuing a production well at the Old Buzzies Ranch pending the viability of this project as determined by a soil boring and test wells productivity results. Eddie, are you coming up? Greg, just by way of a little bit of background, I've been involved in this a little bit. What's being proposed is the potential for exploring to determine if a third induction well along the Carson River is feasible. There are two right now, and they're in the Riverview Park, part of our open space area. This would be consideration, and there's a map in your packet of an area, a prime area further south, and possibly a couple of other adjacent areas, just for a preliminary boring, if you will, to determine if it makes sense to consider going forward with the feasibility of a production well, which ultimately would be part of the city water system. So what we're looking at tonight is the first step, but the concept is if there's a decent well potential there, that it would probably be followed up with a more comprehensive review and approval with respect to the possibility of a well site and the associated utility and access to it. You can see that the proposed location is relatively close to the river, as other induction wells are. So with that background, I will defer to the gentleman in front of me. Knowing that Eddie's fighting a bit of a cold, are you the spokesman tonight, Eddie?
If my voice carries through, yes. Eddie Qualieri, for the record, Carson City Public Works Water Utility Manager. Nice to see you all. Thanks for having us. So I was just going to add some benefits to having this river well to our system would be utilizing Carson surface water river rights in conjunction with our groundwater sources. It adds, as the other two river wells have added, great reliance or great redundancy for our sources. This one would add to that. The other two wells are large wells, or on the larger scale, about 1,500 gallons per minute, which are bigger than any of our groundwater wells produce. So that being the benefit of a good producing well and adding another one to that repertoire of wells along the river. The other benefit that the river wells add is that you get the benefit of using surface water rights, but the quality of the groundwater that exists along the river, which is at a better quality than in Eagle Valley and in our other wells that the city owns, where we're constantly balancing different contaminants such as arsenic and uranium and nitrates and other things. More flexibility, better quality water, we hope. And those are just, I just wanted to point out some of those extra added benefits of a river well. Greg is here from Vidler. He can also talk to the actual actions that go with a soils boring log and what that will tell him as far as if there's water there or not. And I will leave it up to just questions that you may have that are more specific to anything that you want to discuss.
Eddie, if we could, before we open it up to questions, could you or Greg explain what will be happening on the ground, the impact of it, and how it would be mitigated in terms of any open space impacts to our property?
Yes, my name is Greg Bushner, and I'm with Vidler Water Company here in town. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me here, and also members of the committee. Really, soil borings are pretty minimally invasive. They can be done with on a truck-mounted rig, so you can drive the truck into the site where you want to drill the soil boring. It's a small diameter hole, about 5 inches, and it simply logs the lithology or the geology, whatever the material types, clays, sands, gravels that you would encounter as you drill down at that location. And the reason that we picked 3 sites, hopefully that's the map that you all have, is to fill in data gaps. We have some information further to the south and also further to the north. And drilling those 3 sites would fill in information. And then after the soil boring is done, you can simply backfill it with native material, and I think the state makes you put concrete or bentonite seal on top of it to the land surface. And so once it's done, you would never know that you really even drilled a boring at that location. Let's see what else. The depth that we would go down to is probably 300 feet. Or so, just to get a good idea of what the lithology again is at depth. So that's pretty much it. It's very, very quick, and again, it's minimally invasive. It's not a big production.
Thank you, Greg. Question from the committee. Alan.
I don't know if it's a consideration, but adjacent areas are utilized by migratory waterfowl. So I don't know whether the timing of it would be something that you'd want to consider, avoid when birds are nesting there in the spring. It may not be an issue. I don't know. I just wanted to raise it as a possible concern.
do you want me to respond? So a couple things on that. We can schedule this whatever optimal time it works out to the benefit of whatever is going on at the site. And so we could schedule it again to be done when it wasn't a migratory bird issue. The other issue that was brought up to us was a noxious weed issue. So we could also figure out how to mitigate that. And it's not a long the soil borings are not a long process. It's very, very quick. You could probably drill these in maybe a week's time total, all three sites inclusive.
Margie, did you have a question?
I have a kind of a question, I guess. You're talking now about just the soil boring, but looking at the map, wells 25 and 41 were fully developed as production wells for the city, and they had to be raised pretty high above the floodplain because you are working in floodplain at this point. And I'm assuming that if you decide to move forward with an actual production well there at Buzzy's Ranch, you're going to be having to raise that up quite a bit too, and have an area around it that isn't usable by the lessee. I just wonder if anybody has talked with Mr. Anderson about that and his thoughts on the topic.
Ann Bollinger for the record. Yes, we have talked with the leasee. Also, we have talked with the previous owner. The purchase and sale agreement stated that when the sellers, if they, as long as they hold water rights and up to 4 years after the point that they sell, they reserve the exclusive right to graze. And so also we need to get express written approval from the seller, interesting enough. So we did get that from Mr. James Gerard, and we have talked with Mick Anderson to let him know that this will happen, assuming that it will happen, and we'll coordinate those efforts with him and the grazing operations out there. And then as far as raising the well and access roads. So yes, the wells on Riverview Park, the trails, the roads and the trails serve double duty. And so assuming that Public Works will need access to the production well, we can also play double duty, and the trail that we have been talking about on this property can serve that purpose.
I have one last question, and this is for Carson City Public Works. What is your projection for when an additional well will be needed for the summer yields?
That's a good question. Right now, Eddie Quagliari for the record. Right now, we're doing okay as far as water rights versus demand and production. But looking at the future, we are going to need additional supplies. Looking at, all the way out to full build out. So at this moment right now, we don't need the production, but, circumstances change. We've recently experienced changes in water quality at Marlette and Hobart that we weren't expecting. So those sources have dropped off, and who knows what else will. So it's kind of a balancing act. Right now, our demands are averaging over the last 4 years about 12,000 acre feet per year, and we have supplies up to about 17,500. So that doesn't mean we can produce 17,000, but we've produced in the past about 15,000 during the 2007, 2008, during the height of the before the recession. So we're doing better now because the demands have dropped a lot, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to creep back up to that 15,000 area. So having these, like I was talking earlier, having these additional supplies and balancing them and having redundant supplies is always a good thing, because you never know when water quality issues pop up on your other supplies. So.
Anything else, Margie?
No, thank you. That'll do me for now, and I didn't forget my questions this time.
Donna?
one little thing that really doesn't have anything to do with what you guys are talking about, but in this thing it says financial impact is no, but in the open space considerations, it says that if we were to drill a well, we would have to return partial of the grant funds. So that seems like there is a financial consideration.
Correct. There is a financial consideration, and as it's stated in the staff report, the partial grant funds would be returned and calculated from the initial appraised value and the final area of determination. So kind of a square foot calculation. Rough estimates at this time, assuming about a quarter acre, which I think was well 41 at Riverview Park, that would come out to $1,800 payable by Public Works.
Oh, so it wouldn't be payable by us?
We haven't discussed that, but I would hope not.
Oh, okay, then I don't care.
If we were to move forward with a request for a production well, we'd have more discussion.
Yeah.
But we also need to remember that Public Works is the holder of water rights that we certainly could find a home for at some point in the future as well. Other comments or questions from the committee?
Sure, I got one, Bruce. You might be able to answer it. Maybe Eddie can. It's just an informational thing because I don't have knowledge about production well regulation. In a drought year or series of years, are production wells locked in at a certain capacity, or do they have to reduce rates to be commensurate with the flows at the time during a drought year?
I can try, and then Bruce can fill in the gaps that I miss here. Eddie Qualieri for the record again. So that's a really good question. The water rights portion of this whole thing hasn't really been investigated too much. Greg could probably talk more about it, but since it's in the very preliminary stages, there hasn't been any water rights moved anywhere, so I don't even know what rights they're talking about. I know there's surface water rights that will be used in this well because that's what it's for, or that the intent of it is. And those river rights, just talking generally, they go on regulation based on their priority date. So if you have a really early right and the river's not on regulation, you could use that right. And you'd be capped at a certain amount that you have, obviously. But, as a drought would go, the earlier rights would drop off in priority. So it just depends on what rights are in that well. That would depend on to answer your question. If it's a really early right, you would have access it to when the river comes on, which is in April or May, and goes off in October, which is the decreed area. That can change too based on the federal water master. He kind of sets that when the river is available or not. So it depends on the water rights that are in that well on when you can use them. But you're looking at a time frame of the irrigation season, which is, April to October generally. So for river rights.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Any public comment? Mr. Graytech, come on up.
Yeah, because you guys, why don't you stay? Because I have questions and do. My name's Dan Graytech, concerned citizen, resident of Pinion Hills, formerly on the Carson River Advisory Committee. So we in our committee, we would have a lot of questions for these guys because what we're talking about is infrastructure in the floodplain, which as soon as we put it there, we start defending it, and it becomes serial engineering. The purchase of the property was to protect the river corridor. That's what we wanted to do. Developing municipal water rights, I don't think was a concern. The living river concept was give that river room. And because we purchased the ranches, we have enough room. And as long as we don't try to protect something that isn't there yet, we can let the river work as the way we want it to work. If you look at that well 41, it has a lot of armor between it and the river. The river still overtops it, but, you know, we're going to be looking at something, a big rock mound with an industrial complex sitting on the top of it, long driveway, and a pipeline that isn't there now. And, you know, I don't know if there isn't somewhere else we can drill wells in the city. So I guess you mentioned in here that there's some wildlife benefits to this well and irrigation benefits. Can you explain to me how those are going to happen?
Greg Bushner, Vidler Water Company, for the record. So as part of this process, our intent is to actually donate some water rights to open space for the continuation of irrigation on that property. I can't really address the infrastructure issues that you say, you know, how it looks and all that, but we would provide a water source that would be available for use on this property.
So does the city currently have surface water rights that we're not using and we could be using it at the ranch? Taking it out of the ditch?
You want me to try to address
go ahead,
that?
Bruce, yeah.
Dan, I think I can probably address that. The city does have significant surface water rights in wells 25 and 41, the other two induction wells. And in addition to that, additional water would potentially be brought into a well site here. That would be water that Vidler Water Company would bring into the well site, and a portion of which would be potentially become part of the city's surface water supply through the induction well.
Supplemental irrigation. Sorry.
At this point, we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but the concept is not to be pumping water from a well for irrigation. It's to be continuing to use the Mexican ditch with some trade-offs with regard to the surface water.
Okay, that's because that was my understanding. If we take surface water rights, and maybe induction wells are different, my understanding was that if we take surface water rights and we start pumping with them, there's already a duty on that. You have to move them to that hole. So if we wanted water for the ranch, we'd have to punch a hole in the pipe unless, like you said, we're going to transfer some over. But that well is going to pump for municipal purposes. I don't know what Carson Water Subconservancy looks like, but I don't want to put a well at the ranch that's going to dry the riverbed in the drought, because we're going to run that pump during the low part of the river, and I don't care what we think, that sucks water out of the river corridor, reduces water for riparian areas. And I just don't know if that's what we want to do there, if we have options to take that water from somewhere else. Even if that water's coming from Carson Valley through the plumbing system that the Subconservancy is building.
Yeah, the reality is during a drought, the induction wells get cut way back. They are regulated just like an irrigation diversion. And so the federal water master does not allow Carson City to pump, even if it's in priority, if the river is below the threshold level for delivery on the dates that the water rights, the decree dates in the water rights. So you can't pump this well in a drought when there's no water in the river. It will be precluded, just like 25 and 41 have been. If you talk to Ritt Palmer or Brandon Mathieson, they can tell you that, you know, they had wells shut off. I remember a couple of years ago when we were talking to the water master, because if there was no flow below Ambersetti Pond, they weren't going to allow the induction wells to be pumped at all. So there is recognition of the realities of the river system. These are induction wells. They are river water, so you're right.
So that's my concern as we continue to add them. We're drawing that water out of the river corridor, and the stress on wildlife and riparian systems, I think, will become more and more obvious. because we're doing this for municipal water, and I think we can drill municipal wells somewhere else that isn't in the riparian corridor.
The only other thing I would add is that the irrigation draws water at 4.5 acre-feet per acre. The municipal draw would be limited to 2.5. So you do have that fraction, if you will, that's in the decree that is intended to offset the return flow portion of the duty in the decree. But, you know, you're right, it's an induction well, but it is subject to priority, and priority is subject to availability.
I will trade Public Works, the pipeline that's delivering the water. If you bring me back effluent water, and I don't know what the concerns are using effluent next to an induction well.
The issue of effluent next to the river is probably as big as effluent next to an induction well, and that's the issue. But part of this bigger picture from an open space standpoint is we're going to have a river corridor that we're going to be trying to preserve and protect, and that includes encroachment or defining, if you will, a boundary for the irrigated area as well as other activities along the river itself. And those have been things that you guys identified years ago in the Carson River Advisory Committee, and things that as we get further down along the line in planning with regard to Buzzy's Ranch, we're going to be looking at in terms of setbacks from the river, protection for wildlife, and the kinds of things that we run into at Silver Saddle as well.
So the board needs to decide if we proceed with boring and it works, then you get the well as a result. And is that, you know, what we want to see on the banks of the river on the Buzzy's Ranch?
Okay. Any other comments, public comment, question? Okay. We have anybody else on the committee have any comments or questions? All right, do we have a motion?
I would like to go on the record saying I'm not convinced that it's something that we should be moving forward with. And I was trying to decide what else I would like to know. One thing I would like to know before we make a motion, because everybody appears to be a little bit perplexed about how to move forward on this. What is the benefit to open space, not to Carson City residents, but to open space? What are the benefits that open space would gain from this?
As Greg mentioned, Vindler Water Company has offered to donate a percentage of their water rights that then we can use on the ranch, because otherwise we don't have water. It is in our open space plan to pursue those opportunities, so I think this is one of those opportunities. And then, again, the access road to the production well will serve double duty for the trails that we've also identified here.
Thank you, Ann.
Well, I got to say that I'm conflicted on this issue because I do respect the riparian areas, but I also see the need for the water for Buzzy's Ranch. I know that's been a topic of conversation for quite some time, and it will be a big issue if that all dries out and we don't find the water to do it. So just my concerns, I guess. I'm just conflicted. Thank you.
I'm glad Jerry went first. This is the gentleman that spoke before. That's the first time I've seen that side of the issue, and I was ignorant to it before. The impact that a structure such as this to be built in the river corridor, how that looks, how that changes, how the river can move. It gives me pause to basically reflect just what Jerry said, that now I'm conflicted.
Curtis, did you have a comment?
I do. Excuse me, I do. Curtis Horton, Carson City Public Works, for the record. One of the things that I would like to say is that, Yes, it will require a structure and a large rock mound, just like well 41 to the south, or excuse me, to the north. But one of the things to keep in mind as we develop water production sources for the benefit of the community is that we have to look everywhere, and we have to look at our sources. We have to look at the water rights that are available to us. And we have surface water rights that are not usable because we can't produce them into the system. This well will help us produce those water rights into the system and will benefit the community as a whole. And that's the bigger picture that we have to look at, is what do we do as we move into the future? Eddie had mentioned earlier that we look at production sources. Maybe we don't need it today, but we might need it this summer. We need it as we move forward. As the community grows, we have projections that show that we need to develop more water sources in order to utilize our water rights to the fullest potential. This is the development of one of those critical sources. It's kind of been on the books for a long time, but it needs to happen, from our perspective, so that we can make sure that we utilize those rights properly, that we serve the community to the best of our ability, and that we take care of open space and keep that area green and do the best job that we can to manage it.
Thank you, Curtis. Any other comments, Ann? Oh, I'm sorry, Donna.
I have one question. If in the future, as the community grows and there's conflicts are going to develop, let's be honest. Water is a precious resource, and in this area it's going to become more and more precious. We need this water for Buzzy's Ranch, and we're going to need it in the future. Is there a time in the future when you're going to come back to us and say, okay, well, we promised you this to keep Buzzy's Ranch going, but we're going to have to take it back from you now because people want it for their lawns?
I honestly don't see that happening in the future. Once we set up an agreement and we start to deliver that water to open space from the sources that we are able to deliver it from, I don't see any reason why it would be cut back or changed. I mean, we put a plan together, we move forward with our plan, we maintain that going into the future. We always keep in mind the need for open space and for the other things that we do and the other water needs that we have. We shouldn't have a need to change that.
I think in following up, I see it as similar to what we have delivered now on Silver Saddle, where we have the Mexican ditch, we have the 80 acres of irrigation on Silver Saddle. And, I guess my thought, Donna, would be that once it's locked into open space, it would be, we would have some sort of covenant, some sort of understanding agreement, kind of like the restrictions we have in the conservation easement, the way I would see it. Yes, Eddie.
Eddie Collier for the record. I was going to address Member Hall's question question on the structure itself. And I heard an anecdote about how 41 and 25 handled in the floods, where they're out in the floodplain and the water kind of moved around them. But it didn't. When the water receded and went back to its normal flow, it didn't impact the river at all. So any impact would be to the structure itself and not to the river. It wouldn't impede the river's natural flow, and that would go into consideration in the design of it too. How far it is away, where is it meandering, and et cetera. So I just wanted to give you that it's not going to be a big wall like a levee across the river that's going to prevent it from moving. The river's going to do what it wants to do, but it's not going to change that meandering at all. So.
Additionally, when we talk about the industrial look of the well house, those are things that can be considered as we design and construct the building itself, is the way it looks. We could improve the look. We could work with the committee and take a look at that and see what we could do to make it a little more palatable, as far as its appearance goes. There are things that we can do.
Yes, Greg.
Yes, Greg Bushner again. The only thing that I would add to this discussion is that my company, Vidler Water Company, any commitment that we make to the city, to open space, I mean, we commit to it. I mean, we'll honor that. So if we dedicate water for the purpose of open space, however it's delivered, we commit to that. That's done. So my boss would stand behind that 100%. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Greg. And we would, I guess, note that Vidler has donated to open space 20-some acres?
38?
38 acres, so, of ground, kind of just off the end of Hell's Bells Road, which is open space on the westerly side of the river. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Yes, Jerry.
Is the River Conservancy group still active? They're the
Carson Water Subconservancy
Yes.
District?
Is it still
Yes.
active? You guys still meet?
The Carson
No,
River.
I'm sorry, the Carson River Advisory Committee
Correct.
is not active.
We were folded into your board.
Yes.
The river corridor is now your responsibility.
Yes, that's what I wanted.
Dan, the reason I asked is because I don't know the situation with the river, how fragile it is. I mean, I know it's a fragile commodity, and I know how valuable it is to the city as well as it is to the community, but for different reasons. I mean, the city would like to get water, and we would like to see it preserved for recreation or, just for the future generations. So I was just curious if there was a way of knowing how fragile and how much water that was going to be pumped out of there if the river gets to a certain level, do the pumps just shut off? I mean, you said that during a drought that they restrict their flow, but is this extra well going to lower that river to a level that we should be concerned about if we're trying to preserve and to protect the environment of the river?
I can answer that. No. Curtis Lorden for the record, Public Works again. It's not going to lower the river in that type of respect. Yes, those wells are influenced by the river and the water that's in it, but there are rights assigned to those wells that we monitor on a daily basis, not weekly or monthly. We look at it daily to know what our production is and what we're doing. And we keep a close eye on it, and we manage it quite well, actually. So far we've done a great job with it. I think the staff does an excellent job and working with the other committees and the people who are involved in it. So we're very conscious of the amount of water that we pump, the water rights, and staying within the regulations.
I'm Dan Greatak. Jerry, when they folded boards in the city, you guys became responsible for the Carson River. The Carson River Management Plan spells out what those things are that the committee used to do. The Carson River Coalition, which is a watershed-wide group that has adapted master plans to manage water all the way from Alpine County to Stillwater, they're still an active group. They still meet. They have flood issues, non-point source issues. They do a lot of education, with kids and stuff in the river wranglers, those kind of things. They work closely there with the Carson Water Subconservancy. So I need some clarification. Vidler is talking about Carson City owns these water rights, or are they Vidler's water rights? And when they go into the pipe, are we providing water just into the general system, and in 10 years, that pipe's going to go all the way down to Lake Lahontan?
Greg Bushner again, for the record. No, we have our own water rights that we would put in this well and take out, and then Carson City would also have water rights that could be withdrawn from the same well. So it's a dual.
So would it be limited to Buzzy's Ranch only, or would it in the future be available to other places?
So what we would do with our water rights is we would make them available further downstream. That's what we intend to do with our water rights if this process goes through.
I think the concept, as I understand it, Jeremy, is that the water rights that would be donated to Carson City for open space would stay in the Mexican ditch or be in the Mexican ditch and would not be moved through the well system or downstream. What has happened is Buzzy's Ranch water rights have been moved downstream, and so we're working to figure out ways to backfill that and keep Buzzy's Ranch green. We're on a temporary permit set this year for 2018, and those expire here in a few days, the 1st of November. And so we're now looking at longer term, and we're going to also probably have to look at the shorter term. Right now, Vidler has pending applications to go into the Mexican ditch that would potentially backfill most of Buzzy's Ranch for next year. But that's a temporary solution, and that is not directly related to this well. There would have to be other water right changes to accommodate this proposed well if it went forward. Other questions or public comment? Do we have, yes, Ann?
Mr. Chair, to help the committee digest this item a little bit more, this is a multi-phase project. So right at this point in time, Public Works and Vidler Water Company, they're only talking about the soil boring and the water testing. So we're not talking really about any infrastructure at this time. Pending those results, that would determine when and if a production well would be constructed. So it's possible the results may not even come out to fruition.
You know, it's a process that potentially leads to a well site, but that's not what is in front of us tonight. I would point out that 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 2 or 3 test wells were drilled north of well 25 in the golf course area and on some of the Vidler property that was donated. They were unsuccessful, and they did not result in a completed well. So in terms of induction well potential in Carson City, this is the area, well, potentially Riverview Park, are essentially the limitations of what Carson City might explore for a future third production well that is an induction well. It's a river well. It's just drilled in the form of a well because it facilitates getting that water into the system. So it's, you know, the city's made Swiss cheese out of the aquifers around here and has had a hard time finding production wells, and when they find them, they have uranium or they have other issues. So it's a challenge, and this is one of the possible locations. What we have tonight is exploratory holes to determine if it makes sense to consider a production well. There would be further action obviously required of the committee, the Board of Supervisors, and we would have to get approvals for any kind of activity on ground that was purchased with state grant money, or state partial grant money. So it is moving in the direction of a well, but you're not committing to a production well should you look at that tonight. It would answer some questions which lead to a process, but we're a long ways from getting into that process at this point. But I think it's important for the committee to understand what's out there, not just a narrow sense, but it's potentially, if everything went smoothly, it could be a well site, but that doesn't necessarily have to be. Yes, Margie.
Our proposed motion uses the wording "pursuing a production well," which sounds like we're blessing the process all the way through. And I would be willing to propose a motion to investigate the viability of a potential production well. But and with the water quality testing and the soil boring, to determine if there's even a potential for it, but that's about as far as I would be willing to go at this point.
Okay, does that first step, does that make sense in terms of?
Curtis Horton for the record. Yeah, absolutely. We're comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you, Curtis. Any other questions or comments or further discussion?
I'd like to hear what the rest of the board members think on that.
Okay.
I think you will as soon as we vote.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion then, if that's okay. I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors pursuing a production well at Old Buzzy's Ranch, pending the viability of this project as determined by the soil boring and test wells productivity results.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Well, I do.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with approving and going forward with the soil boring and testing wells, or test wells for productivity. I don't have any issues with the activities associated with that. But then when we move forward beyond that and start talking about the types of well houses and structures that are out there, I would really appreciate it if you would bring some alternative ideas to address the concerns that we've expressed here, and on that end, and then I think internally some of us can do our own our research as to the ecological impacts of this, and then be more informed at a later date and be able to make a better decision at that time. That's my intent.
Okay.
Anyway. I don't feel
Well-
comfortable voting for a production well today, but give me some more time and provide me with some more information, and then I would be.
Well, I think Margie, suggested changing the motion to eliminate pursuing production.
Yeah.
I think Margie had recommended changing the motion to eliminate the pursuing production and just going with something a little less.
Well, if I understood the discussion correctly, the Public Works Department is comfortable with the idea of a recommendation for approval to do the test borings and the investigative process now.
Right.
And I think the committee's sense is we'd like to have more input before we went any further than that.
Right.
Is that comfortable with everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Margie, did you want to modify we have a second and a motion. Can we tweak the motion to make sure that you're comfortable that what you had suggested was involved?
I would like to modify the motion and instead say that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors investigating the potential of a production well by soil boring and test wells at Buzzy's Ranch, determine the viability of a production well project, and check the water quality analyses to see if it's something we want to move forward with.
Jerry, I apologize. You made that motion, and I didn't mean to.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, just for a point of order, can we have, I'm sorry, Member Masad withdraw his motion?
I withdraw my motion.
Does that satisfy, Ben, what you need?
And then can we just, for the record, restate the motion that's now for...
Do you know how hard that was?
Well, it was a little confusing for me, so I want to make sure that it's clear for the record. I apologize. Thank you.
I move that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors investigating the potential of a production well at the Old Buzzy's Ranch by checking the viability of the project by soil boring, test wells, and water quality results.
Thank you. Is there a second? Jerry, second that again?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, moving right along. Review, discussion, possible action, possible approval of the 2019 Open Space Advisory Committee meeting schedule. Ann or Jennifer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. Try to keep this quick since we're getting a little late already. So on April 19th, the Board of Supervisors reviewed and evaluated the possibility of combining the Parks and Recreation Commission and the Open Space Advisory Committee at the direction of the former city manager. That direction did not go forward, but however, they took the direction to have the Parks and Recreation Commission as well as the Open Space Advisory Committee to each only meet 4 times a year, and also recommended 2 joint meetings a year to try to promote cross-communication between the both boards. We will be having some board development that I've talked about previously. I've put off scheduling that just because we've had some staff absent due to family matters, and I want to make sure that they're in attendance. So it'll probably be in December or January, so we can learn how to make sure that your meetings are efficient, try to reduce some staff time, and have some of the goals that we had from the city manager, but still meeting the needs of the committee and being respectful of your volunteer time, because we realize you're giving up your time from your families to help us and to work through these boards and items together. So we want to be respectful of all that as well. What we've looked at is some possible meeting dates for your consideration. The CR room is very booked, which is, I call it a good problem, because everything's so active in this community center, and we have some limited time available. So right now, the Open Space Advisory Committee is scheduled to hold meetings the 3rd Monday of every other month at 5:30 p.m. for a total of 6 meetings per year. With moving to 4 times a year based on the board direction, and we can always schedule special meetings. If something occurs, if there's a grant deadline, if something's going on, we can always add meetings to the schedule. So this is, I would look at it as a minimum schedule. And right now we have, in 2019, the 3rd Monday of every month is still available, except February due to President's holiday. So it would be February 25th, April 15th, August 19th, and October 21st, 2019 for your consideration. The Parks and Recreation Commission has already met this month, and they voted to have the joint meetings on June 17th and December 3rd, if that was acceptable to the Open Space Advisory Committee. We can always move those joint meeting dates if there's a special item of interest, or there's flexibility, but we wanted to tentatively get something on the calendar for those joint meetings.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jeremy?
Jennifer, just curious, we had, because the CR room is so booked, and we did have in place the 3rd Monday of every other month, February, April, June, August, October, and December. Why don't we just keep those? And then 2 of those dates can be the joint meeting with Parks. Since it's already and has historically been locked into those dates, why drop them? And then we have to scramble and then vote for the schedule. It seems like we had a really consistent way moving forward, and now it's we have to figure it out year by year.
We can keep everything, tentative and book the room. That's not a problem. I would like us to try to hone in on those 4 meetings that you'd like to have, if possible, and then we can have the other dates as a tentative schedule and backups for any other items. Just because when we publish the schedule, otherwise we're publishing 6 dates. And the board is really trying to encourage us to reduce time for the recorder's office, the DA's office. There's other things associated with this direction, and I want to be respectful of that. We can always keep the dates reserved in here and not have something else booked in its place.
Totally understood. So maybe for 2020, we just go, well, my idea would be just let's go with the 3rd Monday every other month, 5:30, just like we've had it before, and perhaps the park committee members might take issue with that, but I guess for them, fortunately, they already had a meeting, and they set the schedule for us. So I'm going to put my 2 cents in and say let's do this for 2020.
And they were very flexible. They realized that they were meeting before you, and we could have, had I known about our potential joint meeting next week and some other things that were sort of out of our realm, we could have discussed it jointly. So we can't really go back. And I'm happy to take anything, other suggestions back to them, or we can add that to the joint meeting schedule. I'm just finalizing that agenda if you'd rather do that and just have the joint meetings
I think at this
up to date.
point, it's a done deal, no biggie. I just think moving forward,
Sure.
we could try to keep it more consistent.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Any other questions or comments with regard to the suggestion on meetings for 2019? The President's Day holiday falls on the 18th, so we would be on the 25th, but other than that, it would be the 3rd. Okay, this is an action item. Is there any public comment? All right, hearing none. Committee comment or a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move to approve the Open Space Advisory Committee schedule for 2019.
Second.
Further discussion? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye. Negative.
Any comment, Jared?
Well, I'm just being selfish because I like being able to I've scheduled a lot of things in my life based on open space meetings, and now they're changing them. So I don't know that I'll be able to comply with the direction of joint meetings, and I'll do the best I can, but my objection is that. The third Monday every other month works.
Okay.
Member Masad, I just want to clarify, so your regular open space meetings would still be the third Monday of every other month for 4 months? It would be February, April, August, and October, if that's what you choose, which was written in the agenda. So that would still be the same, your 4 meetings, you're just eliminating 2 meetings.
I'm okay with the elimination of 2 meetings. I just noticed that you have some other meetings scheduled that aren't on the third Mondays, and I will have conflicts.
So the one joint meeting on June 17th would be the third Monday.
Right.
So the only one that you would have a conflict would be December 3rd.
Yes,
Which
ma'am.
is a Tuesday.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, the motion passes, and subsequent discussion, I think, clarified at least 1 or 2 of the items, but Jerry's schedule is further ahead, and hopefully as many of those as possible will fit.
Right.
Things move forward. Okay. Item 3E for possible action, review, discussion, and possible approval of the 2018-2019 Open Space Work Plan with a proposed $55,000 amendment to the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. Ann?
Mr. Chair, would the committee like a 5-minute break? I don't need one, but this
What's
is...
the committee's desire?
Power through.
I'm good.
Go through, is that okay? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is a follow-up to the great discussion that we had in February when we reviewed the budget and the work plan. I'm very proud to bring this back to the committee for a robust discussion and clarification on a number of items. In the packet, there's a number of attachments to this. And with those attachments, I tried to address some of the questions as well. The Carson City Municipal Code, Chapter 13.06, that is the open space current ordinances right now. Some of the questions back in February is, what are our guidelines for allocation of our budget? So as you read over the ordinances, the Open Space Advisory Committee does review the budget and provide recommendations on an annual basis to the Board of Supervisors, and our budget is to be utilized for the maintenance and management of open space properties. In addition, we do have the approval to spend money if needed on federal lands if it helps achieve our objectives as well. The budget for fiscal year 2018 to 2019 is attached. That's the current budget year. Organizational charts, department-wide, the Open Space Division, both current and proposed. Recommendations from the management plan for open space and parks in the Carson River area. the open space staffing analysis and assessment. I had an interesting time identifying what open space properties we still have left for potential acquisition throughout the future, and what kind of timeline are we looking at, as well as our budget and our staff. With that, the open space opportunities maps, the east side and west side are attached. And a table with our status updates, whether we have had discussions with previous owners. The open space properties map, those are our current ownerships. The work plan for this fiscal year, noting who among the open space staff is responsible for what item, as well as timelines for completion. I try to address, are we really trying to do too much with our existing staff? And what kind of timeline are we looking at to get some of these completed? Is it realistic? And looking over that, you'll notice some of them on the work plan are just ongoing, like the Horace Creek Conservation Easement Monitoring. It's every year, so it's just ongoing. As well as the work plan for last fiscal year, noting the completed items. So we do have some success. So kind of going back to the budget a little bit, and feel free to ask questions at any point, because there's a lot of information here. So going a little bit through the staff report, I highlighted some items specifically I wanted to bring back to the committee members that I hope will answer some of your questions. So fiscal year, about mid-paragraph, 2018 to 2019, the estimated revenue is a little over $1 million. So there was a question, how much money, what's our budget for the year? Later in a few pages back, when I provided the entire budget, you can see that 42% of that goes towards staffing. So we have 4 full-time staff, 4 part-time staff. Those positions are paid 100% out of our budget, and then we pay percentages of support staff. The director, the office assistant, office manager, and a park planner as well. Throughout the year, line items can be adjusted, just exactly like this item in front of you this evening. As we look at our current staff, specifically related to our vehicles, and we had a fun time this summer juggling the vehicles, and we had a checkout system. So that is one of our shortfalls. So I'm asking you tonight to approve budget to buy another truck for next year, as well as a UTV to help us manage the south end of Prison Hill. So yes, budget items can be adjusted depending what their request is. If it's personnel, particularly full-time personnel, there is an internal process, an internal finance committee that we need their approval, and ultimately the Board of Supervisors. Moving down through the next paragraph, as we look at our remaining land acquisitions and our staffing, throughout time of the open space program, we have been very judicious about bringing on new staff. Very careful, very cautious. We didn't even want to get staff heavy. We are very careful. However, also what that has resulted in is almost overnight, back in 2015, the number of acres that we managed doubled. And to some extent, we're playing catch up, but because open space properties are primarily natural vegetation, the properties that we manage are really primarily low impact properties. So as I identified future staff, you can see that I still haven't identified a significant increase in staffing. Let's see. So in the short term, and I define short term within the next 5 years, 2019, I have a typo there, to 2024, with or without additional acquisitions, I still recommend some changes to our staffing. Potentially the upgrade of the trails coordinator to a full-time position. You saw this evening the amazing work that Greg Bergeron is doing, whether it's Greg or someone else. this position is making a big impact in Carson City.
And is Greg interested in bumping up to full-time?
He is.
Okay, that's awesome.
As well as the addition of 1 full-time and 2 part-time positions. Those are primarily related to what we anticipate an increase in the number of events out at Prison Hill and bringing on potential events at Silver Saddle Ranch and potential events at Prison Hill and new trailhead facilities. In 2020, there will be possibly a new trailhead at the end of Kings Canyon Road. And if successful, we might have a new trailhead at the Clear Creek property. So we will need staff to help clean toilets on a daily basis. With all that in mind, and what kind of impact is this on staff, going back to our judicious and thoughtful strategic approach to staff, we do have a line item in our budget for professional services. So one example of that is hiring Nevada Land Trust as needed to help us with land acquisitions. So hiring professionals as needed. There was another question in February, if we hire more staff, how does that impact current staff and supervision? So with that organizational chart, I hope that I illustrated that yes, at least on an organizational chart, we can still manage the staff that we're bringing on. And then in the long term, starting in 2024 to 2034, this would be our full build out. If we are really successful in purchasing the rest of the properties that were identified in the open space plan, then we're talking a total of about 9,500 acres. So really only adding about 2,500 acres more to our inventory. So we're near the top end of what we're looking at for our acquisitions. And then we can review additional staff needs at that time in 5 years. So with that, I am asking for the approval to purchase another truck as well as a side-by-side. And another handout that I just provided at the beginning of the meeting, since I am asking to transfer funds from our land acquisition account, what I provided here is our current budget, and this number is a little different than your worksheet for the fiscal year 2018 to 2019, because I took the, initially when I prepared this, it was for the June meeting, and I didn't have the new fiscal year. So working off last year's numbers, we have approximately $1,358,000. We did close on the Ham acquisition about 10 days ago. So we can deduct $251,000. The Fagan acquisition, if all goes well, we hope to close within the next 6 months on that, approximately $250,000. And then we just submitted a grant application to the Forest Legacy Program to acquire 100 acres of the Clear Creek property owned by state lands. This is just a ballpark figure in the sky. We have not conducted appraisals, but talking with Mr. Charlie Donahue, who's the administrator of state lands, he has the opinion of value on the Clear Creek property of 1.4 to 1.6 million. For the grant application, I took the high range, because if I submit too low, we can't ask for more from the grant. So I went with the high end. I did, with your recommendation, and I went to the Board of Supervisors, I asked for approval to match that 30%. The grant requires 25%, but because we have other criteria that are low on that property, such as we don't have any threatened endangered species and we're not next to the creek, so we will be deducted for that. But if we can bring in more of a match, that raises our application up a few points. And so we still have a remaining balance of $427,000. There is another acquisition we're still looking at, just to keep in the back of your minds, is a conservation easement on Old Woods Ranch, and that's not identified here on the worksheet. Another question, when does this budget get replenished June 1 every year. And sales taxes right now are going up.
How much was added this year?
Well, one of the items that didn't get translated over in the budget, but it's fine because we're still able to work, is when finance gave us the budget, they know we're in the land acquisition business, so they put it all in land acquisition, and then they expect me and the department manager to allocate to the different line items as necessary. The management line item got missed, but that's not to be a concern because we still have enough funds from last year. So this year, is as identified in your worksheet, we added about $500,000 to the land acquisition line item.
And any idea what the value of the conservation easement, or I mean the cost of the conservation easement might be?
The best I can do is give you a comparable. So on the Horse Creek Ranch, right adjacent to it, I think we purchased that around 2009, 2010, and we purchased the conservation easement for $1 million.
So that would definitely need to wait.
Anything else, Ann?
That's all I have for now, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions or follow-up with Ann? Yes, Donna.
I just want to say that this report is fantastic. I can now see what's happening. Before, it was always a little bit confusing, and it's a lot clearer than it ever has been before.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Jerry?
Yeah, it seems, if memory serves me correct, that you were going to prioritize the tasks for the open space maintenance projects and give us a guesstimate of when they would be completed. And I don't see that in this report, and I've been waiting patiently for months. So I'm curious if we can get this at our next meeting, or if this is just something that's not going to happen.
So one of the items I did for the work plan fiscal year 2018 to 2019, I at least put timeframes on there. So I did put years, sometimes months on that line item. Perhaps I can talk with you more after this meeting to see perhaps how how this form didn't help answer that question.
Yeah, I think, Ann, if you could maybe coordinate with Jerry, and then if you can get the results of that out in an email or some format so that the committee as a whole is dealing with the same information. I think we'd all appreciate seeing that. Any public comment? Okay. This is an action item. There's a lot of information in here, and it's a good reference information, by the way. You don't have to necessarily, even if you haven't had a chance to look at everything, it does give you good reference and a good format. And I think, Ann, you're right. I think it's been improved from what we've seen before, and that's helpful. Okay. Any recommendations or motion from the committee? And it does include, as Ann mentioned, the purchase of a vehicle and a side-by-side.
My 2 cents is that you need the right tool for the right job. And so if the open space staff need $55,000 for a truck and a UTV, I think it's a no-brainer. If you've ever tried to screw in a screw with a spoon, it's not very easy to do. So let's give them the tools that they need. And the only suggestion I would make is if you're with the searching for the UTV, make it a 4-seater so I can come.
4-seaters have a longer wheelbase.
They're awesome. I have a lot of experience with them.
We're an efficient organization, Ann. 2 seats is probably good. But listen to Jeremy's,
or
listen
do
to
we need
Jeremy's
two
arguments, but,
UTVs?
Right?
no, I'm just giving him a bad time.
Making the motion, Jeremy?
Sure. I move to amend the budget allocations in the amount of $55,000 for fiscal year 2018, 2019.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Public comment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you, Ann. Okay, staff updates. Well, we'll call for public comment again in case I did call for public comment before the vote, so we'll go to staff updates. Ann, do you want to brief us on where those are, or do we have staff members or committee members that want to address those?
Just starting at the top of the list, the signage plan is starting to get implemented. We have 2 new monument signs with the new red color to designate for open space. One of the monument signs is at the second entrance of East Silver Saddle. The second monument sign is actually a replacement at Carson River Canyon. You might recall about 2 years ago, we had some vandalization happen out there. Someone removed our 2,200-pound monument sign, so we have replaced that. And just a message for anyone that tries, we now have an 18-inch concrete base that's buried underground. So if you try to pull it out, your bumper will probably come off.
Don't tempt people.
I'd like pictures.
Okay.
And then the kiosks. We have 5 large kiosks purchased. They are in our yard, 5 small ones. We have designated the locations. So actually going back to the priorities, we have identified the locations for that first 10, and 2 of them are going to Prison Hill. Jerry?
Where in Prison Hill, Ann?
Coots and Clearview. And 5th Street, the 5th Street trailhead.
So I noticed you moved the one from the bottom of the street
Yes.
that identifies it as Carson City Recreation Area, I guess it is. It's not open space. And so you're going to place things at the ends of this. Oh, whose land is that going to be on?
Well, the monument sign that was at Edmonds and Coots has been moved further uphill, further east onto what is
I
our
saw
property.
I saw both locations, where it was and where it is. My question is,
The kiosks?
yes,
The current rules and regulation signs, except where the new monument sign location is, I think that there was a rules and regulation sign. That one is coming out, and the kiosk will be placed at the trailhead locations where people park their vehicles.
so it will be on the other side of the fence
No.
line?
No.
So it will actually be on city property and not open space property then?
It will be on city property, and we have been looking at the west side of the fence, so closer to where the vehicles park. Would you like a field visit? I'm always wanting to go outside. I just
Come
don't.
walk with me and my dog. Every morning, we're out there and we know exactly where you're putting them.
Okay.
I have a comment on signage. I've noticed this before, and I was at a training for OHV and RTP grants, and they were doing some clips of projects that had been completed, and I noticed it again, and so I asked them about it. They've been putting U.S. flag stickers on signs, and just by putting those stickers on signs, they have dropped vandalism to almost zero. And you can get rolls of those stickers for practically nothing, and you slap them on a sign. They don't shoot them, they don't take them out, they don't do anything to those signs. So I recommend we start getting rolls of those stickers and slapping them on all of our signs.
I'll gladly donate them.
Let's start with Carson River Canyon.
Absolutely. But it's amazing. I asked them, I said, is that really working? They said, yeah, it works like a charm.
Interesting.
We won't go there, Jeremy.
I didn't have my speaker on.
What did you say?
All right. It's just as well, Donna, it's just as well. Okay, cultural resources, Ann?
No update with that item, but I have it here just as a reminder to update the committee as we move forward. And then on the third item, Jeremy can provide an update there.
Sure, be happy to. A couple weeks ago, Ann and Lindsay and I met with Daryl Cruz to discuss the opportunity for the washoe to provide some proposed names for available open space properties. Daryl was really excited. He thanked us for involving him. He had a meeting with the Washoe Cultural Committee. We provided the map of the properties with that are up for grabs for names, and I believe Lindsay took Daryl on a field trip so that he could get a better sense of place names, because the way that the names work, oftentimes they're associated with overviews and lookouts and things like that. So he wanted to try to tie those types of names as closely as he could with the proximity of an available property. So he came up with 6 names that we'll present, and we've invited Daryl to participate in the next meeting. We'll try to get that on as an agenda. Missed it this time. Clearly, we didn't need it. There's enough on this agenda. So we'll present that next time, the available names. What I'm hoping Daryl can provide is an explanation to the names and why he chose them. I could say for several of them are a little difficult to pronounce, but I think that with phonetic spelling that we can get past that. I don't think that should shortchange. I see that as some folks may be having a concern, but I don't think it should be, especially if we present it in the right way. So that's what we have to report. We've got some movement on open space names.
Great. Thank you for moving along with that, Jeremy. That's great. Yes.
I have a question.
Donna.
Did you have something?
Well, I'm just wanting to get some help with my memory. It seemed to me that there was going to be there was another working group forming that was basically Alan and I on the OHV maintenance. Did I miss that, or is that no longer an issue?
My apologies, I missed that.
Okay.
Did you want to make a report?
No, I want to report. We're good.
I don't know if this belongs here, but we also, I was going to ask tonight about the student member. Where are we? We've got a new year. Where are we on that?
Yeah, she was appointed, I think, with the understanding that she was a junior last year and would be able to participate for this year, but she had a conflict tonight, as I understand it.
That's correct, yes.
She's missed 3 of the last meetings.
She didn't miss the last. Yeah, I think she was present the time before last, but not the time before that.
Okay, anything else, Ann, on working groups?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any public comment? Further comment from the committee? Okay, we'll move forward. Director's report, a non-substantive update regarding departmental projects, programs, and grants, recruiting for vacant positions, and Board of Supervisors action items. Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. In addition to the handout that I had for you, I just wanted to provide Public Works answers regarding the Kings Canyon Trailhead project that you had previously, and I wanted to make sure we talked about that in a public setting. So one of the questions that you had was, will the road footprint widen for that project? And the proposed project is to reconstruct Kings Canyon Road to a width of 28 feet from the current 18 to 23 feet. It does vary depending on the section of the road that you're in. You asked to clarify the bike lane access, and if only on one side of the road, which side. The tentative plan before design is that there will only be sufficient room to add one bike lane. Since bikes move slower uphill, the bike lane will be installed on the north or westbound side. You also asked, the third question was how the NEPA process will be handled and what will be the coordination with the U.S. Forest Service and the Federal Lands Access Program. That program must comply with NEPA and the Central Federal Lands. The federal agency will be conducting all required studies and reports. The U.S. Forest Service will be signing off to some degree on the document since a portion will be on their land, mainly the trailhead parking improvements and the construction of the new parking area with the bathroom facilities. We anticipate the project will be constructed in the summer of 2020. So I think that was all the questions that you had previously that you asked for further follow-up on. And then if there's any questions on the report I provided, I'm happy to answer anything for you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, Donna.
On the Paiute pipeline along Fairview, so we're getting some money for that. I assume that some of that money is going to go for restoration of where they scrape all the vegetation off?
The money that came to the city and is earmarked in the open space budget and also the golf course budget because of the locations of the easements is for future city use on those lands. The restoration of those sites is not the money that came to the city, but at their sole expense. And it'll be monitored over time. Our natural resource manager was out there doing before pictures. We're going to be monitoring that with them. We've provided the specifications and all of the requirements for that. So that'll take several years, obviously, to come back, but it'll continue to be monitored. But that's at the sole expense of Paiute Pipeline. So the money that came to the city was the purchase of the easements for the pipeline. So we have that money, for our future discretion and added to the open space budget.
So
We'll
they're
take every
supposed to be natural, they're supposed to put natural planting back in, reseeding, et cetera?
Yeah.
Just to be clear, is that the same pipeline that's going down Edmonds too?
Yes.
So my question is are they going to do something about the drainage down Edmonds at the same time as this? Because they're digging up that side of the road that's always flooded. And it seems like a natural progression of things, but I bet you it wasn't even addressed, huh?
I'm not certain on that portion.
Yeah, I was just curious if you had any information about it.
Yeah, I don't.
I know
but
it's
you're
not
right.
in your purview.
Especially Edmonds and Koontz right there. It's
oh my gosh.
awful.
And they're going to be digging it up anyways. I'm surprised that somebody doesn't say, hey, well, let's.
And that portion is on
here.
federal land, so, we only reviewed the sections on the open space and the golf course property. Public Works might be able to assist with a response, though. I can find out for you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any other questions of Jennifer? Any public comment? All right, hearing none. Activities, projects, and grants located on open space properties within the Carson River area. Ann.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't take up a lot of time, but a reminder to the committee, as Dan Graytack was here earlier, he talked about the Carson River Advisory Committee. When that committee folded, the Open Space Advisory Committee assumed those duties. That's why we have one agenda item specifically focused on the Carson River. And so we try to identify some of those projects. There's a number of items in here, particularly related to the Eurasian water milfoil. It is a state-listed noxious weed. It was only found about a month or two ago by our weed coordinator, and with Lindsay Boyer, our natural resource specialist, and our maintenance coordinator, we have, in Department of Agriculture, we have been out along the ditch and the river to start hand removal of this. Since it is water related, it's pretty difficult to use chemicals. And two other items I just want to point out in here. And Jared Whitaker, he is our maintenance coordinator, started with us back in May. He was not able to join us this evening for his introduction, but we'll invite him again to the next meeting. Another project, I hope you smiled as you read this report, is the Poo Poo Project. That was a project that came to our attention from the wildlife biologist at BLM. She notified us that BLM is starting to put these covers on top of the vent toilets on vault toilets, and it keeps the birds from flying in, which apparently has happened to us at Silver Saddle when we went in there. So now we have these special vents on top.
We don't go for survival of the fittest, right? Margie.
And it's my recollection that Eurasian water milfoil, if you break it or only get a piece of it, it still regenerates. Is that correct?
That is correct, and it actually, to some extent, disarticulates itself.
Yes. So people who are trying to help with this project need to know that you're no help if you aren't getting the whole piece.
Correct,
at a time.
and related to that, what they were doing across the Mexican ditch, they would put up a net at some point in the ditch downstream from where they were working that would catch those fragments as they were pulling it up.
Very good.
Is there water in the ditch?
Yes, there is.
Oh.
And then just one other item, if you want to circle, is the Friends of Silver Saddle Ranch Holiday Open House, December 8th. It's right there as a reminder. Are there any questions?
Great. Thanks, Ann. Okay, any public comment? Committee comment?
Do you have any sense for when SHPO's going to get through with their Silver Saddle effort? Particularly, so get on with maintenance?
There's actually a number of steps. I think it's this week, Lindsay Boyer is meeting with the architectural historian out there who will help us write a plan on how to manage the facilities. But other parts of it has just fallen on my shoulders, and I just have not been available for the last couple months.
Yeah, that one's been a long time coming, so anything Lindsay can do to help move that along is going to be great, Ann. Okay, activities related to natural resource management, AmeriCorps summer intern, including vegetation management and special projects. Anything further on that one? That's E. 4E.
We missed D.
Yeah, I was going to say, did we do D?
The chairman has a prerogative of adjusting the agenda. Let's go ahead with 4D then, just because you want to.
Well,
Activities, projects, and grants throughout other areas managed by Open Space.
Yes, and the committee members, I think, can all read very well, but I would really like to share recognition to Nevada Land Trust. Without Nevada Land Trust, we probably would not have been able to purchase the Ham property. Back in, and as well as Jennifer Budge and the district attorney's office, back in March, I took an agenda item to the Board of Supervisors to purchase the Ham property. That morning or afternoon, we learned that there was a pending offer on the table. I left the next day to go out of the country. Jen, Iris Yule, our previous deputy district attorney, and Nevada Land Trust jump into action and worked over the weekend and the next 5 days to get a purchase and sale agreement, lock those owners into place. We had volunteers write the grant application, and we were able to close this in a matter of months. It is the fastest acquisition for Open Space and the fastest acquisition for Nevada Land Trust. And we will be celebrating that on Friday at 1 o'clock, this coming Friday.
I'm going to be there.
Great. If you have a four-wheel drive, you could drive up to Ash Canyon Road to the Square Pond and walk uphill where you see the for sale sign. If you don't have a four-wheel drive, park by Wellington Crescent, and it's a half-mile walk.
Uphill.
And the time on that?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, okay.
Really don't need a four-wheel drive
I'll
for
follow.
the tanks. Any old car can do it.
Actually,
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Ann, on 4D?
Only if the committee has questions.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank you, Jennifer. You're the only one present to thank in person.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Nevada Land Trust. And thank you, Iris, for all your hard work on that.
there's been a lot of exciting.
Great.
Mr. Chair, if I could make just one comment.
Certainly.
For the open house, I believe it was in the email you all received, but since I have you all here today, I just want to remind you that there may be a quorum of the board present on Friday if you attend. It's a social event, so that's not a problem, but just please remember not to discuss any matters either pending or that may become before the board for open meeting law purposes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. It's not a working meeting, so. Okay, any public comment at this point? All right. Anything, Ann, on, or an update on activities related to AmeriCorps summer intern project, or intern including vegetation management and special projects?
Joey Kelso was our first intern, and by his report, I hope you are pleased to see how he was able to assist Lindsay in the natural resource duties. He came to us from North Carolina and loved his summer out here, and he hopes to come back next year.
Great.
I was really excited to see this. I didn't know this was going on. I hate Russian olive, and I was really excited to see this.
Okay, anything else on that one? Public comment? All right. Activities related to trail projects managed by Open Space Division. Ann?
Yes, one item that I don't believe was on the report, but Member Welch and Greg just talked a little bit before the meeting, so I want to brief the committee. If we're successful, one way or another, with the purchase of the Clear Creek property, we have had a number of volunteers already out scoping for the new trail that will link Clear Creek to Kings Canyon and the Ash to Kings. There's already been about 3 or 4 alignments, so we're continuing to work on that.
Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. Just to add on to what Ann said, our transportation manager, Lucia Maloney, and her staff are helping us look at a safe way to properly get pedestrians under that crossing. So they're really helping us look at what a scope of work might be to make sure that that's safe, so we could go after potential grant funding. They have some funding sources as well that might be helpful to us. So we're already looking at that analysis as well.
Great, thank you. Appreciate your help, especially in Ann's somewhat limited availability, so thank you. Okay, any public comments on that one? Seeing none. 4G, activities related to the park rangers, including interpretive and education programs, enforcement, and projects. Ann?
I don't have anything additional to add to this report.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment? Yes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer Butch again. I just wanted to add, we have a new park ranger aide that started today actually, and it's all funded out of the general fund, out of the parks budget, but it will be helping open space do interpretive programs and supplement our ranger program as well.
So is that a full-time position or part-time?
It's a part-time position.
So we have 2 full-time and this part-time?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
That's a big help.
I'd like to make a comment. Just that John Costello has been a real great addition. He is such a sweetie, and we just love him dearly. You can tell him that from me. I may see him on set. Huh? Yeah, he is pinchable, isn't he? Yeah, I may see him.
We got problems all over this committee tonight.
It's getting late,
We're going to have to censor some people here.
No, I may see him when he picks up my trash after trash mob. But no, he has been a real asset. He really has. And he loves it here, and he's so excited about his job all the time. He really is so positive. So I just want to say that.
And we appreciate his report as well. So thank you. And thank you, Donna. That was Donna Inverson.
I'm never going to live this down.
Okay. All right, member announcements and requests for information. Margie?
I don't know if this needs to be to the whole board, but I would like to know more about how the Russian olive treatment went and what is going to be replacing the Russian olive, because even though it's not native, it is providing some habitat, and buffalo berry is not generally in the area much anymore.
Noted by staff, right? Okay. Other member announcements, questions? Donna?
Me. I'm proud to announce the Virginia and Truckee Rail Trail Project got another year's grant from the RTCP. Thrilled with that. Seems how they were reluctant to give us our first grant, and they were very happy to give us the second grant. But I'm also very sad to report that Deb Reardon is leaving the RTCP grant, the program. She's taken a job with the Regional Transportation in Southern Nevada, which was a big step up for her, but we're losing her. So we don't have the assistant for the grant program until they hire a new one sometime, they hope, early next year. But the V&T project is definitely moving forward. We're planning a site visit. It's sounding down there.
Try this one.
We're planning a site visit for the Douglas County section of the trail, and we're starting to look at working on a joint OHV rail trail bridge over the Carson River. So, because they want a bridge to get over the river, we want a bridge to get over the river. So we're moving forward. We're not sitting still. And for those who are interested, the Eastern Sierra Trails Coalition Summit is going to be November 16th. If you want any information, just ask. We will be doing, it's a really exciting program we've got going for that, and will be all of the trails organizations on the entire Eastern Sierra from Alpine through Washoe counties will be giving talks on what they're working on, what's been going on in their areas for the last year, and what they're doing in the next few years. So.
Great, thank you. Thanks for all your help on muscle power and related trail items. So, other member announcements or questions, requests? I would note we have a meeting next week, Monday. Agenda packets will be out in the next day or so. Is that?
Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. Mr. Chair, I sent you the agenda for your review and approval, and then I sent our Deputy District Attorney and then Stephanie Hicks, our Property Manager, the draft staff reports and everything. So as soon as they're approved, we'll get those out to you.
Great. I think I guess in any case, the doodle pool came out. I will not be in town. I'll be in Elko. So Alan has agreed to chair from the standpoint of open space, right?
I didn't know I did that.
Well, I'm going to be gone, and the vice chairman will probably be in a position to take care of the open space side of that meeting.
He might have to take care of everyone because Leanne Keever has not responded, and then Commissioner Curtis on the Parks and Rec Commission is ill, so she won't be attending. So Alan might need to run the show for us.
He can do it. Margie, did you have something?
I had a question. My understanding is that this meeting next Monday is going to be discussing the omnibus lands bill. That is the purpose of the meeting, right?
Correct. There's basically only one item. The long and short of it is Congressman Amade came to the Board of Supervisors requesting any technical corrections that needed to be made. They requested a very quick turnaround, which is the reason for a meeting. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had a Park Commission meeting earlier this month and made a joint meeting instead. But it's to just clean up some outstanding issues from the landfill previously. Basically, maintenance burden items that we should have acquired, a few technical corrections like that.
I remember, I read that over when it first came out and was going to be going to the Board of Supervisors. So at least I might have some recollection of that one by the time we're ready to meet next week.
So it's the exact same packet that previously went to the board, and then the item was pulled by Supervisor Bagwell, and she requested this joint meeting.
Is the subject of this meeting the 6 parcels on Coons Lane, or is there more to it?
There's more to it.
Okay.
So if you're either not able to attend or able to attend, if you have any questions after you read your agenda packet, feel free to call me and I can help try to give you some direction on that before the board meeting.
And I apologize if I'm holding up getting that information out. I'll get back to you on that if that's the case.
I just sent it tonight, so you're not.
Oh.
You're good.
I haven't been reading my email during the meeting, so.
Just Facebook.
Okay, same package as the board got, I take it. And then the other question I had was, I think we're moving on the ordinances, and that process is moving forward, and with, or Jennifer, whoever's the right person, and Ben, I appreciate the DA's office getting their part on that moving forward too, but we're looking at November now, is that the time frame?
Yes, our previous deputy district attorney is ready to move forward. I have just asked if she could wait for me. My availability, since I have been trying to work on these also for about the last 4 or 5 years. So that's the reason it's been held up.
Well, they've been a long time coming, but I think we want to get them right. So I appreciate your continued involvement, Ann, in that. Just move it as quick as you can. Okay, any other board members or committee members' announcements? Future agenda items for our agenda? Anything particular for staff? Margie?
I would like to hear what we are doing with the SNPLMA funds. I can never say that. It's SNPLMA.
Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act.
I would really like to know what we are doing to date with the grant that we have received.
So that's a request for kind of a progress report?
A future agenda.
Yeah, okay.
Jennifer
Jen?
Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. So I also heard earlier that you wanted the update on the Russian olive treatment and then the open space naming as well. Any other items I might have missed?
Thank you for the reminder, yes.
As far as I'm concerned, you don't have to put the Russian olive on an agenda item. It's up to you all. I'm interested for my own interest.
We could at least put it in the natural resource report.
Okay, any other future agenda items? Last chance for public comment? Okay. Anything else from the committee, or do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.